I saw that Robert put in the chat the yahrzeit of his daughter. Say her name, Rivka Bela Bas Shlomo Zalman. Bas Moshe Zalman, sorry. Bas Moshe Zalman. So learn Aliyah. So today's daf in Masechet Kiddushin, we'll get started for those online and on the recording, is daf Chet 28. And yesterday, we actually stopped in the middle of a sugya. I'm not sure if I did the right thing, but I did it anyways. We are on the top on daf Chet Amud Aleph, and we are the third line from the top. So just to remind, to get into it again, the Mishnah's halacha was that you can do this thing called Gilgul Shvua, or the way we called it was you can amend basically a Shvua. Zokikin was the word in the Mishnah. But Gilgul Shvua meant that if you are required to make a Shvua about something that the Torah generally describes as Shvua, for example, someone who's modeh b'miktzat, who admits to part of a claim, or someone who has one witness but not two witnesses, that's enough to require shvuah when you talk about money. And once a person's required to make that shvuah, you can also say to the person, oh, I want you to also swear about something else, right? Maybe something that you denied completely, or something in karka, right? Something in land, which you generally wouldn't make a shvuah about. So we saw that we learned this out from Sota, where Sota has to make a shvuah that she didn't essentially sleep inappropriately with someone. And we said in the Mishnah that she says amen, amen, to include situations that she normally wouldn't have to swear about, like when she was engaged. But once you require her, min haTorah, to swear about when she was married, you can add in other scenarios. So the same thing is true by money. As the Gemara today, the third line is ashkechan bivadai. You found that you can require a person to make a shvuah when you are certain that they owe you something. Meaning, I go to you and say, you owe me $100, and you say, I don't know what you're talking about, right? But I'm confident you owe me $100. So then, if I can't make you make a shvuah if you deny the whole thing, but if you're making a shvuah for me anyways about a different loan, because I was foolish enough to lend you a second time, right? Then I could be migalgel the shvuah about this loan. But what if it's a safek? And there's a classic case of shuat safek, which we're going to discuss more in Shavuot, but it's called a shvuat hashutafim, or arisim, a shvuah of partners, right? Generally, I don't know if you've been a partner with anyone, but there's good partnerships, and then all partnerships sort of devolve. They never stay great, and at some point you start suspecting your partner is cheating you or is taking advantage. So there's a concept where two partners come to split up at the end of the season, they come to split up. And the same thing is true about an aris, right? An aris is a sharecropper. So you trust them to work your field. At the end of the season, they come to you and they say, okay, there are 100 bushels of strawberries this year. And the deal is I get half. So here's 50 for me and 50 for you. And of course, you're suspicious that the aris might have got 150 and hid some of the other ones or sold them on the side of his truck, right? So the same thing is true about shutafim, that you're worried that the shutaf was not minding the business 100% kosher. So you want to make him make a shvuah to say that you did everything with integrity, that you did everything kosher. But the thing about that shvuah is that there's no real basis for that shvuah because you don't have any specific claim against him. It's not like you think, oh, you stole $100 and I want you to pay me back. And there's no modeh b'miktzat, but you are suspicious. So now you can't generally make a person make a shvuah about that. We'll see. But if you have another shvuah anyways, you could be migalgel a shvuah on that nature. So how do you know that you can do that? Because that's a safek, right? It's not a known quantity, basically. So how do you know that? Ashkechan vaday safek minalan. Tanya Reb Shimon ben Yochai Omer nemra shvuah b'chutz. It says shvuah about b'chutz, meaning outside, which is referring to when the sota essentially is outside, right? So it says shvuah when you're talking about a case of the sota essentially, well, we'll see in a second what it means, but it says it also b'chutz. The nemra shvuah bifnim. It also says a shvuah when you're talking about inside the Beit HaMikdash, which is the case, right, of the safek. So sorry, the shvuah b'chutz is general kind of shvuah that's given in general. The shvuah bifnim is the shvuah of the sota, which is done inside the Beit HaMikdash. Ma shvuah hamura bifnim, just like a shvuah that you're talking about inside the Beit HaMikdash, meaning sota. You don't know for sure if your wife was guilty of this crime, right? You suspect it, but you don't know. So you want her to swear to clarify. So there, asaba safek kivadai. We treated a safek, meaning you're unsure if she was inappropriate, with a certainty. You make her make a shvuah. Af shvuah amra b'chutz. You would also compare asaba safek kivadayin. So if you have a safek, and it has to be legitimate safek, but a safek in things like business, well, not so clear if it has to be legitimate safek, but say it's a safek in things like business, so then you basically allow them to do that. All right. And this is sort of, I mentioned this yesterday. Tosas's question is like, how long does this extend? Right? Can you just go up to anyone and say, I want you to swear that you never did anything wrong against me? Or does it have to be within a situation in which there's at least some interaction that would have made you suspicious? So that's a discussion. Continues the Gemara here, 6 lines, 7 lines from the top. Ad hechan gilgal shvua. What can I ask you to swear about? Right? Meaning, if I'm making a gilgal shvua, so I say to you, you borrowed money from me, you admit that you borrowed half of it, you have to make a shvua modeh b'miktzah. I also want you to make a shvua that you never insulted me, right? Or you never, like, what can I say? Or make you a shvua that you never, I don't know, you never were did something inappropriate against my family member, or whatever it might be. But what can you say? So Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, the Amar Leitz example is, and this is supposed to give you a far out example, you say, Hishavali she'ein avdiyata. I want you to swear that you're not my Eved. Meaning, I suspect that you are not my Eved, well, an Eved, right? That you're not an Eved Kanani, meaning you're not a non-Jew. Prove to me that you're Jewish, right? Which is a pretty insulting thing to say to a person who lives their life and is assumed that they're Jewish, right? So you say, I want you to swear that you're not a non-Jew, that you're not an Eved. This is Gemara. That's not an appropriate thing to say to another person. If you accuse another person of being an Eved without any basis, we punish you. We would actually put you in cherem. We would excommunicate you. The Tanya, as we learned straight out in a Braita, hakorei lechavero Eved. If you accuse someone of being an Eved without basis, right? We excommunicate you because you're essentially trying to exclude them from being treated as a regular Jew, as a Jew, for example, and we treat you that way. We don't speak to you. If you call someone a mamzer, you call someone a bastard without any basis again, so fake it darbayim, you get 40 lashes, you get 40 malka, which is drabanan, of course. At least me drabanan, you're accusing this person of being a mamzer, meaning that they're assuming they're not, of course, right? And or you don't have any proof of it. Then you basically are treated as if you treated them, which is as if your relationships were inappropriate or you were doing things wrong. If you call someone a rasha, you call someone an evil person without basis, then you're ready molechayav. He can go down into your business. Is literally what it means. He can go into your parnasa. Not so clear exactly what that means. Rashi here, there's actually a lot of debate about what that means. Rashi here says that you can hate the person and you could treat him in a way that would even reduce his income, so that people treated him poorly, right? You can, cancel him, that's what we would say, right? You can treat him in a way, that's how my interpretation of Rashi. There's others who say, there's Rishonim who talk about the Gonim, I think even talk about that you can actually go and you can damage him, that you can burn his belongings, or you can punish him, you can do all kinds of things if someone calls you a Rasha. So clearly you can't just make accusations against other people, even though you have a Gilgal Shvuah. Amar Rava, says Rava, we are Daf Chavchet Amud Aleph. For those joining a little bit late, we are halfway through the Daf. Amar Rava, Hishavali Shalomim Karli be'Eved Ivri. You can say to the person, I don't claim you're not Jewish, or you're a mamzer, or you're a Rasha, but I think very clearly that one night, late at night, we were making bets, and you agreed to sell yourself to me as a slave. You're my slave for the next 5 years. Swear to me that never happened. So there, again, it's a pretty far-fetched thing because you think you'd remember, and there would be record of being a slave, but it's not something that impinges on his character in any way, and therefore you can do it with the Gilgal Shvuah. Says why is that so far-fetched? Right? That's a normal claim, meaning all I'm saying to you is you agreed to pay me $1 million or $10,000 and you're going to work for me because you can't pay it back. I'm just saying you owe me money. I mean, it might be a large amount of money, maybe something you disagree with. It's not that far-fetched. This is where, because no. Eved is not just money. Rava l'tamei, as we had earlier, Damar Rava, Eved Ivri Gufo Kanui. When you get an Eved Ivri, it's not like you bought the wages that he's going to produce for the next 5 years or 6 years or whatever time you get him. You actually own the Eved, and what does that mean exactly? And I'm not so sure. We talked about this more in our Masechta. You obviously have responsibilities to that person, but in some ways you actually are buying them. And there it's a much stronger claim. So you're not just saying, oh, swear to me that, you don't owe me 10,000 more dollars. You're actually saying, swear to me that I don't own you. Well, owning you, I mean, that's not so crazy. That's like saying, swear to me that I don't have that your house doesn't belong to me, right? Because you own a house, you own the object, the thing. That's where, well, you're right. But a house, I would have thought, right? A house is something that you sell in private. Remember, we talked about this a little bit yesterday and before, that people don't necessarily want to advertise that they sold their karka, right? Remember, karka, usually you inherited, it was your family inheritance. It was a big embarrassment to have to give up, to lose rights to your family property. So you didn't want people to know. You sold, remember, we talked yesterday about writing a star. You said, I don't want you to write the star. You don't want people to know about it. So it could be that it happened in private, and therefore nobody knows about it. And so I can say to you, well, I want you to make a shvuah about it because we have to clarify, right? So in Ita Dezabin, it's possible that you sold it, but let kala. Nobody knows about it. But hi, a slave, in Ita Dezabin kala itle. I mean, that's a pretty rare thing and a pretty big thing. Everyone heard that someone was sold as a slave. So you might think that everybody knows about it, and therefore you can't pull it out of the hat and say, I want you to make a shvuah about it. It's something that's widely known. Kamash Malan, that is something which may not be known, and therefore you can do Gilgal Shvuah. So if I have a reason to force you to make a Shvuah for something that the Torah requires, like you borrowed money and admitted to owning part of it, I can be Migalgel, I can go along with that and make another Shvuah about other claims, such as a claim that you actually sold yourself to me as an Eved Ivri. But I definitely cannot call you or claim that you're an Eved Kanani or a Russia or a Mamzer without proof. Otherwise, I am liable for whatever responsibility the Breita set. Just makes me think about, nowadays people calling each other by names. And imagine the liability. Okay, says the next Mishnah, we're up to the Mishnah Daf Chavched Amud Aleph, and we're up to the next category. So remember that we had several categories of kinyan. We've been going through them. And one of the things we said, which is very important to remember, we talked about this yesterday, and I'm sure last week you talked about it several times, is that the Mishnah said earlier that for metaltalin, for movable objects, things like TVs, we'll say, right? You're buying a computer. You can't acquire a computer through kesef, right? If I give someone $1,000 for his computer and I hand him the money, we agree to buy it, I hand him the money, I don't own the computer until I pick it up. And therefore, if something happened to that computer, I get my $1,000 back because he didn't produce the computer, right? And we had a machloket, which we're going to get to again today, which is why I'm quoting it, as to why that's the case, right? So you can use a shtar, you can use hagba'ah. Sorry, you can't use a shtar. You can use hagba'ah. You can lift it up, right? You can lift up the computer, you're koneh. You can do chalipin, which we're about to discuss in our Mishnah, some kind of transaction. But you can't use kesef. So why can't you use kesef? So we had a machloket earlier about whether it's based on a pasuk. Pasuk says davar natan miyad liyad. You have to hand it over. So that's one possibility. It's min haTorah. There was another explanation earlier that in fact it's only drabanan. The min haTorah, you can give money, and money would acquire the computer. Why did the Chachamim say that money does not work? Because they were worried about this concept of Shema Yisrafu Chitecha Va'alil, right? We're worried that I'm going to sell you a warehouse full of computers. Okay, the Gemara Mishnah, of course, talks about brain. That was their computer. But I'm going to sell you a warehouse full of computers. And I say to you, for $10,000, here are all these computers. I give you $10,000. The next day, of course, you hear that there's a fire. There's a fire going on in the warehouse. Now, I am the original owner, right, who sold it. If it's not mine anymore, I don't really care about it. If it burns up, you gave me $10,000. I don't care anymore. So we're worried you're not going to take proper care for the thing until delivery. And therefore, people will never buy stuff, right? I'll never buy grain from you that you're going to deliver, like these were futures, right? You would never have a futures market where I buy grain from you that you're going to deliver in March, right? Or I guess futures really doesn't exist yet, but let's say something that exists, but you're going to deliver later, I would never buy it from you because I have no security that you're going to protect it. So therefore, they made a takana that actually the money does not acquire it. And even after I've given you money, the original owner still has responsibility for it and has to protect it. And only after I actually achieve delivery and pick it up will I, the buyer, have responsibility and own it. Okay. So I give you the background, you'll see why in a second. The Mishnah now talks about chalipin. Remember, the chalipin literally means the hachlif, the exchange. And of course, back in the day, according to my sources, which is grade school, that was the way they did all business, was barter, right? There was no external defined money. So there was only chalipin. I would have something of value. I don't think I have very much of value. I guess I'm a doctor, right? So I would deliver someone's baby, and in exchange, they would give me, a goat, let's say, right? So I'm not sure what the exchange there is exactly, but I'm delivering. But you're buying my services, right? But you basically would have chalipin in a case where I produced baskets, and I went to you and I exchanged my baskets for your clothing, right?
So chalipin might have actually been around at the time of Matan Torah, unlike money.
So right, so chalipin is original. Now we of course know about chalipin in that sense. People exchange things all the time. You gave the Mishnah's case as shar b'chamor, right? I got too many donkeys, you got too many cows. Let's have a deal. But if you recall, as everyone does recall in this call, I'm sure, in Megillat Roots, we introduce a different concept of chalipin, right? Because in Megillat Roots, remember they want to make a kinyan to acquire the fields of Elimelech who died, right? And the way we acquire that is through, it says, Shalaf ishna alo me'al raglo, right? You give it to your friend. Take off your shoe. Now, that's clearly not a case where the shoe is being exchanged. The shoe is not worth the fields. Right? You're not exchanging. What you're doing there is you're basically doing, I'll call it a stylized chalipin, right? A ceremonial chalipin, where instead of actually giving something of value for something else of value, instead of bartering, you're doing the mechanism, the action of bartering, where you give over an object, but it's done just to actualize a kinyan, right? And this is, of course, the chalipin we use today. If you sell your chametz that way, I don't know, it's the only thing I've ever done that way. But there, you can do other things that way, where you basically give over a handkerchief to someone, and they give it back to you, and essentially you're exchanging by giving them the handkerchief. You're essentially getting and giving them essentially the rights to all of your property. Okay, that's chalipin. One of the big questions is, can you do chalipin with money, right? So money is a whole new concept, kesef, right? The Torah introduces the concept of kesef. But kesef, as Charlie was saying, kesef is something where you basically have coins that have intrinsic value once upon a time, but you're not exchanging one object for another object. You're giving the value of that thing. Of course, over time, money no longer has intrinsic value and just has sort of agreed upon value, right? And so can you use money for chalipin? So says the Mishnah, let's read that now. Kol hana'aseh damim ba'acher. Anything that is, we think this means, we're going to change what this means, but this is a very technically complicated Mishnah. Anything that becomes value for something else. Meaning we think what that means is anything you can use for damim, basically, for value. So you can buy bread with your money, you can buy cows with your money, right? So if kivan shezachazeh, once a person picks it up, right? Once one person in the transaction acquires, we think it means the money, then the other one is chayav in whatever they guaranteed in replace for it. So let's say I went up to you and said, I would like to have your shor. In exchange for your shor, I'm going to give you 500 coins. So we think what this means is once you pick up those 500 coins, it sounds a lot like kesef, of course, right? So once you pick up those 500 coins, you get the shor. Okay. Now, says the Mishnah, Ketzad. Let me give you an example. Well, the example is nothing like I just told you. Hichlif shor bipara. I say I want to exchange my male cow for your female cow. Oh, chamor b'shor. I want to get a donkey, my donkey for your shor. Once the one party picks up their side, remember they kone it by pulling it or somehow, or bringing it to their chutzner, the other side is chayav for their counter agreement, right? Their other item. Now says the Gemara, that doesn't make any sense. Our Mishnah makes no sense, right? Because the beginning of the Mishnah is chalipin ma'ninu. What do we think you're talking about when we say the word chalipin? It says damim. We think it means matbeya. We think it means a coin, right? But if that's true, shema mina matbeya naseh chalipin. What you would see from here, and this is questionable because we have a rule, we think, that you cannot use a coin for chalipin. The coins can be used for purchase, but they can't be used for chalipin, right? And you would see from our mission that matbeya becomes a chalipin. It does become something exchanged. Says Rav Yehuda, no, it doesn't mean that at all. Let me really explain the Mishnah to you. The Mishnah means to say, achikam, in the last line, kol hanishom damim ba'acher. Anything that, when it was, nishom means it's appraised. right? Anything that has a value and would be valuable in exchange for something else, right? Meaning that you have to appraise it to say its value. The value of a cow is not obvious, right? Because it doesn't say on the side of it how much it's worth. So you have to assess it in order for it to have a value. There you can do chalipin. What does have a value, Nava? 100 shekel coin, 100 shekel bill, right? Or a coin. They didn't have bills, right? A coin. So a coin that says 10 on it is worth 10, whatever 10 of, right? So anything that's an established value, meaning a coin, you cannot use for chalipin. Why? Because we think what this means, turns on the second page, right? We think what that means is that there you're thinking of the money as value of the money, not as an exchange. It's not a transaction, right? Well, it's a transaction, but it's not an exchange. But by a cow, I understand, and everybody knows that it's hard to assess, is my cow worth your chamar or not, right? And so we've got to barter. We've got to make a decision. Anyone who's been to and I guess you bartered before in the flea market or something, right? You make a deal. I'll give you 3 baseball cards. You give me 5, I don't know, things of other similar no value, right? And you try to negotiate what each one is worth. So that's where chalipin applies. And therefore, says the Gemara on the bed, once you pick up one side of the party, right? You pick up either the shor or the chamar or whatever you're exchanging. The exchange is done, and I owe you the other one. I cannot pull out. If anything happens, it's my responsibility. It says Gemara Dekanami. That makes a lot of sense about how to understand the Mishnah, because if you keep reading the words in the Mishnah, it clearly says that. The Katani, the next words in the Mishnah are Ketzad. How does this work? Hichlif shar b'para or chamar b'shar. You switch one animal for another, and shma minada. That's clearly what the Mishnah is saying. It's not talking about cash, right? And coins. It must be talking about one object for another object. And when it says damim, it doesn't mean something that's clear value. It means something that has to be assessed if you want to know its true value. Well, that's a really great reading of the Mishnah. But how did you even think to read it otherwise, right? Well, the thing that Rabbi Yehuda wanted to say initially, which is that, the Gemara wanted to say initially, the matbea naseh chalipin, that in fact, our Mishnah is there to tell you that a coin can be used to make chalipin, right? Not just a scarf, let's say, but even a coin. If that was in fact the way you read the Mishnah, how do you read the next words? My ketzai. How do you read the next words? How could it work, right? A cow is exchanged for a para, a chamar, shar with a par. How could that be? Says the Gemara, no. This is what the Mishnah would be saying. The Mishnah would be saying a coin can be used for chalipin. And not only can a coin be used, but even something that's peirot, even something that has very inexplicit value, one way to understand it, can be used for chalipin. Peirot nami avdi chalipin, ketzad. How could that be? And then we go through the case. Yichlif shar b'shar, basar shar b'para. Girsa, there's different girsot here, but this is one girsa, right? Where you add the word basar here, where you take the meat of the shar b'para, or basar chamar b'shar, right? Again, where you're not exchanging one object for another. It's not a cow for a chamar, or a cow for a para for a shar. It's the meat of a shar, which is something that you buy in the store, for a object of a chamar. So that's the chiddush in the Mishnah, is that you take it a step further. It's not just the object, it's sort of the fruit of that object, right? The peirot of that object. And so, for example, basar shar can be exchanged for a para, or basar chamar b'shar. Not that our Mishnah used the words basar, of course, but that's how we have to understand our Mishnah. Then, of course, if once one party picks up one side, then you are zocheh b'chalipin. So that would be the chiddush of the Mishnah. Not that you can make chalipin with the shar with the chamar, which is obvious because that's what chalipin means, but that the fruit of a object can be used for chalipin. Says the Gemara, that is a great way to read our Mishnah if you hold like Rav Sheshet. That's the opinion of Rav Sheshet. That in fact you can use a peirot, you can use fruit, meaning the product of an animal, which is the meat, or the product of a tree, which would be the fruit, in order to do chalipin. But according to Rav Nachman, you can't do that. According to Rav Nachman, chalipin can only be done through things that have primary value on their own, essentially. They are the quote-unquote mother thing, right? The cow for the chamar, or a shoe for another shoe. But you can't do a second, you can't switch two things that basically are not in the same category, right? So according to Rav Nachman, you cannot make damim into chalipin. Sorry, you can't make perot into chalipin. You can only make something that is essentially primary, right? That is actually the object itself. So El Rav Nachman the Amar perot la'avdi chalipin ma'ikal meimar. So then, what do you mean to say? So Hachi Kamar, that's exactly what you'd have to explain the Mishnah as the Mishnah saying yesh damim shehem kechalipin. That although perot, although fruits of an object or meat of an animal cannot be chalipin, there are damim that can be chalipin. There are money that can turn into chalipin. And what's the example of money, right? For example, ketzad, yichlif demei shar b'para. Let's say you exchange the value of a shar for a para, or demei chamar b'shar, or the value of a chamar with the shar. Meaning, if I say to you, look, I want to buy your para, okay? And you say to me, well, I'll sell you my para, but I want an ox for my para. And I say to you, I don't have an ox, right? But I'll give you the value of an ox. But I'll give it to you as chalipin. Now, why isn't that kesef? Remember, the reason it can't work as kesef is because kesef is not koneh. Remember, kesef is not koneh an object. Remember, you cannot buy a shar with kesef because metaltal, right? So you can't buy metaltal with kesef. So basically, what I say to you is that I want to use the money that I would have given you for a shar. Now, if I say to you, I want to give you $500, right, for your chamor, whatever, your animal. That's not okay. You cannot buy an animal $500 because kesef does not buy an animal. But what if I said the following to you? I said to you, Rosa, I want to give you my para, right, for your chamor. And we agree on this, and I pick up your chamor and I don't pick it up yet. And we say, this is a great deal. And then after a while, sorry, that's not what I say. Take it all back. I say to you, let's say that case. I want to give you my para for your chamor, okay? But then you say to me, wait a second. You go home, you tell your family about this deal, and they say, don't exchange the para for the chamor. Remember, last year he borrowed $500 from you. He owes you $500. So instead of giving him your chamor, why don't you acquire his para for the $500 that he owes you, right? So it's the value that he already owes you. So there says the Gemara now, you can use the value that he owes you to exchange as part of the chalipin. So you can't use cash for chalipin, but you can use the demay of the para that he owes you as chalipin, right? Remember, this is a case we talked about yesterday again as well. If someone owes someone else money and then says, I will forgive you that money for my thing, that's not called giving kesef, right? If you owe if a woman owes you $500 and you say to her, I'll forgive the $500. It's as if I gave you $500 on condition you marry me, or as the kinyan of marriage. That doesn't work because you didn't give her $500, right? It's not considered to be actually giving money. So here too, the person owes you the demei shar, they owe you the demei chamor, they owe you the value, and you say, I'll switch my responsibility for that value for your para, and that counts as chalipin, right? That's what we're saying. Hachin kamer. So I'm going to read it inside. Yesh damim shein kechalipin. I know this is complicated. There are money that sometimes can be like chalipin when you're not giving money, but you're switching ketzad, 10 lines on the top, maybe. Yichlif demei shar b'para. I owe you the value of a shar. I owe you $500. I'm switching that that debt for a para. Oh, demei chamor b'shar, and that works. My time. Now, why does that work? Because like Rabbi Yochanan. It works because this person holds. Rav Nachman would have to hold like Rabbi Yochanan. Damer dvar Torah ma'ot kanot. Because in fact, the money can be koneh, right? Really, min Torah, I can buy your para with $500. But ma'atam amru meshicha koneh. Why do the Chachamim say that only picking it up, a para can be koneh, not giving $500? Because gzeira shema yomrlo nisrufuchi techa b'aliyah. We're worried that you're going to give them money, and then they're not going to watch the object, and they're going to say, oh, sorry, it all got burnt up. We didn't really care about it. We saved our own thing first. And that's a gzera midrabanan. Milta d'shchicha gazer be'rabanan. A thing that could happen frequently, like that case, where I bought produce from you, there's a fire and it gets ruined and you don't seem to care about it, that's common. So there they made a gzera. But milta d'lo shchicha lo gazer le'rabanan. Something that's not obvious, it doesn't happen frequently, not obvious, then they didn't make a gzera. And this kind of crazy case where I owe you $500 and you take that $500 and exchange it for a cow is not a common case. And therefore that in fact would work. And that's what our mission is telling you, that you can use the demay, you can use the money that I owe you as a chalipin. Well, that's great according to Rabbi Yochanan. But according to Reish Lakish, who says Meshichamu Parashat Min Torah, but according to Reish Lakish, who says that in fact the Torah explicitly says you have to pick up something when you buy it. You cannot give money. So Hanicha, it only makes sense Isav Rav Sheshet that we're talking about, or the Chiddush of our Mishnah is that Peirot Avdi Chalipin, right? That not only the object, not only the cow, but the Peirot of the cow, meaning the meat of the cow, can make chalipin. Then mitaretz Rav Sheshet. You can understand our Mishnah like Rav Sheshet. Ella isavar like Rav Nachman. If Reish Lakish holds like Rav Nachman, that our Mishnah is referring to, that our Mishnah has to hold the Amar Perot lo avdi chalipin. You cannot make chalipin with the meat of the cow, and matzbeah lo kani. You also can't make chalipin with a coin. So, b'maimukila, how do you explain our Mishnah? Well, you're right. There's no other way to explain our Mishnah. Al korchach Rav Sheshet tzvirulei. Reish Lakish has to hold like Rav Sheshet that the fruit can make chalipin. So these two unrelated machlokas, right? One, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish about whether money can be koned dvar Torah or not. And second of all, can perot make chalipin? If you hold of one, you have to hold of the other because of our Mishnah. Remember, none of these Amoraim can argue with our Mishnah. And so if you have to hold like our Mishnah, according to Reish Lakish, you have to hold like Rav Sheshet that perot are avdi chalipin. Okay.
Interesting that the words used here, the word kesef is not used in the sugya. Kesef would have been around in the time of Matan Torah because it simply means silver, but I don't know the origin of ma'ot, for instance.
Right. So it's a good point, and it's true. Here we use the word matzbeah, right? A coin.
Matzbeah, coins.
Right, so now,
yeah.
Remember, coins are very subjective, right? Because coins are not. They have some intrinsic value, but they're also dependent on the government or the authority that minted that coin.
Right? So Rav Nachman is predicting fiat currency.
Well, even before fiat currency,
years in advance.
No, but even before fiat currency, right, you had to have some guarantee. There were minted coins, right, of different governments that supported them. And when that government went away, the coins might be much less valuable.
Or more often in ancient times, at least, well, these folks were in Bava where it wasn't such a problem, but the Romans would lie about the value and deprecate.
I'm sure it was not just the Romans, Charlie.
Yeah, well, the Persians did a little better job of keeping their currency valid.
Interesting. Okay, let's keep going. Let's do a few lines on the next Mishnah because tomorrow's daf, I'll give you a preview, is a very, very famous daf that everyone learns in 10th grade at SAR High School, which talks about mitzvot haben al ha'av. So stay tuned for tomorrow. I want to get ahead of the daf a little bit, and I can't get ahead, but I want to catch up at least so that you'll have plenty of time tomorrow for a very exciting Gemara. So let's keep going. Let's try to learn this whole Gemara. Says the Mishnah, Reshut hagavoa b'kesef. If you give something to the Beit HaMikdash and you want to redeem it from the Beit HaMikdash or give it to the Beit HaMikdash, you use money, kesef. As Charlie just said, coins. Reshut hadyot b'chazaka. You buy something from a hedyot, you can't use coins. You can only use chazaka, which here means it's not only chazaka, but also chazaka, which here means actually possessing it, right? Picking it up, right? And second of all, amiratoli gavoa. It's a very famous statement we've had many times, saying that you're going to give something to the Beit HaMikdash, it's as if you gave it. It's as if you actually handed it to somebody else. So you can't go back on your word when you're talking about hektish like you could with somebody else. Not that we encourage you to go back on your word, but technically you could go back on your word. There's just a curse about people who go against their word, but it's not halachically, they can't force you to keep your word. Okay? Tanu Rabbanan, says the Bright, what do we mean? Like giving something to the Beit. It means, let's say the Beit HaMikdash, Gizbar Shnatan Ma'ot Ba'behima, right? A Gizbar goes over, the Gizbar, a representative of Hektish, of the Beit HaMikdash, goes to the store and goes to the marketplace and says, I want to buy a new cow. And the guy comes up and says, I've got a great cow to sell you. But it happens to be, right now it's in Siberia, it's on its way over. Okay, it'll be here in 6 months. So the guy says, okay, I want to buy the cow. Here's $200. Remember, with the hedyot, money does not acquire cows, right? So the fact is that it doesn't acquire it. And if I change my mind, I can always say, here's your $200 back. I don't want to sell you my cow. We don't, again, we frown on that, we curse you, quote unquote, but you can do it. But with hektish, you can't do it. Afilo behema b'sof ha'olam, even if the animal's in Siberia, kana, the Beit HaMikdash owns it. But when you're talking about civilians, right? Lo kana achi yimshoch. You don't acquire that cow until you pick it up, until you pull it. Okay. Now, how do you understand the next part of the Mishnah? How do we say that saying something to the Beit HaMikdash is like giving it to a hedyot? Omer, a person who says, Shar ze olah, I want to give the Shar Betsy as an olah, or Bayit ze hekdesh, or I want to give this house to hekdesh. I could be nowhere near it. I could be in Riverdale, or wherever I am in Manhattan, and it could be in Jerusalem, Kana. The Beit HaMikdash owns it, meaning it becomes hekdesh. You can't go back on that. But if you were a commoner, right, it wouldn't mean anything. It wouldn't acquire because you've not done any action to it to change that. Turn the page until you actually pick it up or pull on it or make a chazakah to change the status. Okay. Rashi points out yimshok means a cow. You can't pull a house very easily. So yachzik refers to chazakah. You go live in the house, you do repairs in the house, you make a chazakah. Now, what about if I make an agreement with a person, okay, that I want to give something to another person, the Beit HaMikdash, okay, and I go to the Beit HaMikdash and I make an agreement and I say to them, I want to buy this thing from the Beit HaMikdash for $100, right? Someone donated something to the Beit HaMikdash, they don't want it, they sell off their extra stuff, they got an extra table, and I say, I want to buy this table from you for $100, okay, got it? $100. And I do a mishicha, I actually pick it up. But you know what I haven't done? I haven't given the cash yet. Well, I speak niftoto. I haven't been able to redeem it yet. And I go to the bank to redeem it. And they say to me, oh, these tables got very expensive. It's COVID. It's now cost $200 for a table. Ad shamad b'matayim. Says the Gemara, notein matayim. You got to pay 200. Why do you have to pay 200? Because unlike with a civilian, where picking something up means you own it, you just owe the money. With hektish, it's the money that matters, right? So until you give the money, you don't own it, and it's not yours. You could probably walk away from the transaction if you wanted to, right? And say, I don't want to buy it for 200. But if you want to buy it, you have to pay 200. My time of natana kesef v'kamlo. We learn it from a pasuk. You have to give money to acquire something from the Beit HaMikdash. Now, let's say you did the opposite. Let's say you said, I want to buy this desk from the Beit HaMikdash, and they said $200. And you said, okay, I'll pay you $200. And you pick up the desk, so it's now yours, right? You go to the bank to get the money. You come back with your $200, and you look at the stock market. You look at the market, and now desks cost $100. So you go to them and say, "Oh, it's a good thing I didn't give you the cash yet. I'm only giving you $100 because with hektish you only use money, right?" Says the Gemara, "Nope, you still got to give. Well, speak the You didn't redeem it until it reduced value to be only worth 100. Still, notein matayim. You got to pay 200. Why do you have to pay 200? You have to pay 200 because if it wasn't hektish and it was your friend, you went to IKEA and you bought a table, right? And it was $200. Then once you pick it up, it's yours, right? So you owe $200. The transaction's sealed. And so my time, we can't have a situation where IKEA makes more money than the Beit HaMikdash, right? So if for a regular hedyot, you would have had to pay the higher number because you picked it up when it was worth 200. You've got to pay the Beit HaMikdash 200 as well. Now, next case, we're going to get to all the cases. We're almost done. Pado b'matayim. Where are we? We are 6 lines from the top. Let's say you actually give the Beit HaMikdash $200, right, to get your desk. You're pulling your truck around to pick it up. Well, you speak the moshcho. You don't actually physically pick it up. Ad shamad b'mana until it's worth only 100. You come back and say, "Wait, can I get a discount?" And we say, no discounts. Notein matayim, right? You have to keep your 200 belongs to Beit HaMikdash because, as we said before, my time it says natana kesef v'kamlo. You have to give cash, and the cash you gave is what makes it yours. Okay, so since you agreed to, this is actually not talking about the Beit HaMikdash. This is talking about a hedyot, right? So only the Beit HaMikdash goes by money. By a hedyot, essentially, you're a hedyot buying it from the Beit HaMikdash. It goes after the money, and since at that time you said it was going to be 200, then it doesn't matter. So you gave the 200, even though you didn't pick it up, your 200 is what belongs to Hektish. So I get the case wrong. But Padobim Mana, the next case, got it, is where you actually you go to the Beit HaMikdash, you say, I want to buy this desk. They say it's $100. You give $100. Okay. You didn't do Mashiach yet, right? So then you circle around your truck and you go to pick it up. Lo speak the Moshcho Ajamad B'Matayim. Now desks went up in value and it's worth 200. Says the Gemara, Ma Shepado Padoin. You paid what you had to pay, and you don't have to give extra money to the Beit HaMikdash. Ein notin lo elam mana. And you don't have to. You only have to give the 100 that you initially gave. That's what I'm. Why is that true? We just said that we don't want to treat Hektish less than a regular person, right? Why don't you say Hachi Nema Nami Nema here too? Why don't you say Lo Yehekach Hadyot Chamar Mehektish, that a regular person shouldn't be more than Hektish? Remember, if I bought something from you for $100, I gave you $100, right? And the next day I came to pick it up and it's worth 200. You can say to me, I don't want to give it to you for 100 anymore because you didn't do a Mashiach yet. So why can't you say the same thing about Hektish? Atu says Gemara, because even a Hedyot who's allowed to do that, there's a curse against someone who does that. Atu Hedyot lav misha para kae. Wouldn't you say the words misha para, which means the one, God, who collected, who paid back from the Dora Mabul, who treated the Aflaga, should punish this person. And so therefore, even though technically you're allowed to go back on your deal until you pick it up, that's very bad form. And we ask God to curse such a person. So we don't want to put Hektish into such a position where essentially Hektish is going back on their word. So therefore, if you buy it from Hektish and you pay the money, even if it goes up in value, you don't have to pay extra money. So that's the difference between a Hedyot and Hektish. And we will stop there and pick it up tomorrow. Everyone should be very excited for the daf. A very, very interesting Mishnah that is well learned and well known. And we'll pick it up tomorrow. Shavua Tov, everyone. And
Shavua Tov, Yasher Koach, and probably won't
last
see
one before Rosh Hashanah. So Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. May you all be inscribed for a good year.
Amen. See you in the new year. Bye, girls.
Bye.